About 2 months ago, I made a detailed video digging into the strange life of ex-adult actress Mia Khalifa. To summarize, I found that the narrative around her life parroted by her and the unassuming media was faulty to say the least, with many falsehoods treated as facts. With that video receiving over 1 million views, I hoped that people would start asking her more insightful questions during interviews, and I became excited when I saw a post showing that she was going to appear on Louis Theroux's podcast. I've been a longtime fan of this British documentarian since I was a teenager, with his style being an influence on my IRL documentaries to this very day. Him hanging out with the Westboro Baptist Church or spending a week in a facility for registered sex offenders with his often deadpan reactions to strange individuals made for very engaging content. In short, I always appreciated his curious nature to see the humanity in everyone he spent time with, and I hoped he could do the same with Mia. Unfortunately, what I would discover this time was a man that didn't do enough research on his subject, seemingly underestimating how difficult it would be to get her to open up about her past. But before we go any further, I want to share a word from my sponsor in video, which I assure you will interest anyone in content creation. No matter the concept you have in your brain for a video, with this program you could write in a prompt to get started, which will populate a first draft with a script, transitions, songs, and edits. And from there you can change out the visuals, voiceovers, and add music to your liking. What I like about this is that in-video AI realizes artificial intelligence doesn't replace the creator here, but rather streamlines the process so they can work more efficiently. On top of this, when you're done with your project, you can have in-video automatically add subtitles and also translate into different languages. And using InVideo's voice cloning feature, you can use your voice to narrate text in your videos. And to be clear, since I know it will be pointed out, yes, they have licensing rights to the visuals from companies like iStock, Stuttershock, and Storyblocks, so the original creators have been properly vetted and compensated. You can test InVideo AI for free, but if you are serious about video creation, you can get a paid plan that starts at just $20 a month. This is the one that I've used, which removes watermarks and includes high-quality stock footage. Just go to the link in the description and use my code GFM50 to get twice the number of video generation credits in your first month. I first knew I was in for a bad time only a minute into the show when he would give a cookie-cutter explanation of the ex-adult star's backstory.
She arrived in the public arena after starring in a number of adult films at the age of 21, though she was only in the industry for 3 months.
This claim is completely false. She was employed at a strip club before working in a plethora of adult videos for a website called Scoreland, then moving on to Bang Bros, where she filmed and cammed for over a year. In between filming and camming, she was in the space for over 2.5 years. I can't blame him for getting this wrong since Mia says it all the time, with the journalist repeating it without question. As the podcast proper begins, the two start off with pleasantries before Louis delves into her current use of the website OnlyFans, where she posts lewd photos and videos of herself to this very day.
On OnlyFans, according to this, you were the fifth highest earning, what would be the term, performer, influencer on OnlyFans.
It's not nudity, it's not performing, it's not anything. It's just a platform that I use similar to how I used to use Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
Her claiming that there's no nudity on her OnlyFans is untrue, and I don't know what compelled her to say this. Sure, there's no hardcore scenes, but she does expose the upper half of her body. I find it strange that she would get this defensive, as Louis wasn't pointing this out in an accusatory way. It was just a straightforward question about her current career without any judgment being passed. What you'll begin to notice is how Mia is able to steer these conversations by smiling and being conversational, whenever asked about her interests such as promoting her jewelry line. But whenever it goes into anything related to sex work, she almost looks irritated that it's being brought up. She then doesn't talk much or just gets very defensive until the topic is changed.
So this is a Louis Theroux podcast first because we have Jeopardy built in. Mia was the #1 ranked performer on Pornhub in December 2014. That's going back. And also, I'm trying not to ignore the elephant in the room, which is that you first came on many people's radar through sex work, and that was a mixed blessing for you, if I can call it. I mean, would that be an appropriate term? Let's put that to one side for a second then. Because what I was going to get to was the idea that what I see in you when I look at your content, you're very active on Instagram and TikTok and also Twitter. In fact, I'm impressed by your productiveness. Like you actually put out a lot of...
I understand why Mia is sick of talking about her past, but at the same time, the only reason she's booking these interviews is because of her adult video career. You can't get mad at Louis for not wanting to have an in-depth discussion about fashion. It's like if J.K. Rowling did an interview but got pissed if you brought up Harry Potter. That's kind of her claim to fame. When Mia does humor him about addressing her past, she has some choice words.
It is a part of my life, but it's not necessarily something that I would ever lead with because it is the smallest blip of anything I've ever done in my life. I know that the majority of women in the sex work industry are women of color, and that's the most overlooked demographic in the whole world. So there is no one policing it because there's no one policing for their betterment outside of sex work. So of course that's going to be even more overlooked.
Pointing out that a majority of sex workers are non-white is such an odd point. I mean, she's not wrong, I suppose, but considering a majority of the world is non-white, it would kind of be weird if that wasn't the case. I suppose she was trying to make the claim that minorities are exploited by the adult entertainment space. But next up, Miss Khalifa reveals a new tidbit about herself that I've never heard her mention before.
I identify as a bit of a nerd, and I see certain nerd-like qualities in you.
It's the autism.
Were you joking when you said that you are autistic or have
No,
autism?
very much not joking. But since I was in high school, I got diagnosed with ADHD in the 7th grade and then OCD and autism in high school.
From what I can tell, Mia has never mentioned having ADHD, OCD, or autism before. So this is brand new info, which I suppose is the most interesting tidbit from the podcast. She then goes on to explain how these conditions have affected her life. This includes her comments related to Israel.
Even if my brain says that is probably what you should not say, it's like a compulsion.
Really?
Yeah. That one was a little bit different, but I also don't regret that. That's not what happened to me isn't the worst thing that happened to someone who was standing up for Palestine. So I also just roll with it and have no regrets.
After much sidetracking, Louis eventually builds up the courage to try to broach the subject of the adult industry again, with a bit more success this time around.
Who doesn't have a slutty phase when they're 2021? I made really bad decisions because I had really bad influences around me, specifically with the person that I was dating at the time. I was in a relationship with a 24-year-old when I was 16, and my keenness to make them happy and do what they wanted is why I was in the industry.
I find it interesting that for some reason in this interview, Mia doesn't want to mention the detail that she was married to her groomer, instead referring to him as a guy I dated or a person I was in a relationship with. I really have no idea why she's omitting that detail, as she has talked about it in the past. Chalking up her time in the adult space as a slutty phase as if most women have done something similar is so strange as well, especially considering that simply pointing out her older husband had a hot wife fetish makes the story so much more understandable. What really is most egregious, though, is that she then goes on to make the claim that her adult videos didn't catapult her into a successful social media career.
Unfortunately, it's there for the world to see, but it's also a great learning experience. It's not something that I see as like something that catapulted me. I mean,
I swear I don't want to be so confrontational with my reactions to her statements here, but how on earth can she not know that her online success is only due to those early movies? Yes, she left the public eye for a bit after, but her career as an influencer and a person of interest in general revolves entirely around the commotion that the hijab scene caused a decade ago. Louis then asks her about the amount of scenes she did back in the day.
Because you made like just 11 scenes or 11 movies?
yeah.
Of course, this is another lie, as she has done around twice that many. But again, I have to ask myself why this claim is even perpetuated. Having done 11, 12, or 24 shoots doesn't change much about her story. Perhaps that's why no one bothers to fact-check it. Miss Khalifa then goes on to make another unprompted comment about Israel.
Do you keep a body count?
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
It's a big thing on the internet
Yeah.
right now.
All I know is mine's probably lower than Gal Gadot's.
Shots fired.
No, those were her shots that she fired.
What did she say?
She was in the IDF. It's a different type of body count.
Oh, you made a joke. You made a very dark joke. Do you see a two-state solution as either viable or desirable?
They have no right to exist.
To be fair, when Louis gives her an out, she does concede that she believes there's a difference between religious Jews and Zionists from the nation of Israel. But if you recall the comments that she's made in the past, this seems to be an ongoing trend, and I'm not sure why she always brings it up. The last interesting part of this podcast I'd like to mention is when Mia looks back with such high regard at her time at military boarding school.
Could you see yourself starting a family?
Absolutely. I can't wait to be a mom one day.
Would you
Send their ass to boarding school. I went to boarding school, and it was the greatest thing in the entire world.
Ask what they want. Did you have a good experience at boarding school?
I did. I had a great experience.
Were you weekly or monthly, or how often did you come
It was about
home?
3 hours from home.
I find this odd because I think out of all the things in her life that failed her, military school should be on the top of that list. Not only is she strongly against U.S. military service, but at this academy she admitted to one of her teachers having a sexual relationship with her. On top of this, she met her first husband at this institution when he was in his 20s and she was a minor, only for him to marry her a few days after she turned 18. If any event in her life was the first domino that led her into porn, it was her parents sending her to this military academy.
That's not really the main takeaway. I think the main takeaway is what an interesting person Sarah Jo is. I was thinking about whether I should have gone a little further in the conversation about two-state solution. I don't know if Mia/Sarah Jo was offended by that question. She did mention it on Twitter afterwards. It'll be interesting to see how the episode is received. Feel free to let me know if you're offended. If you want to dox me, I am open to you doing that.
And that ends what I feel was a pretty lackluster interview with Mia Khalifa. To be fair to Louis, he filmed this before my video on the subject came out, and maybe it's a bit presumptuous that he would have seen it in his research even if it was available. Still, I'd love for someone to sit down with her and have a frank discussion with the real details of her story, instead of just knowing a few false stats of a faulty narrative that have been built up over the past decade. I think Louis Theroux is used to chatting with people that are more open with their origins, so regardless of how earnest he presented himself during this chat, it was going to fall flat. I do hope one day we'll get something a bit more substantial so we can finally uncover the entire story of Mia Khalifa, because I definitely think there's an interesting tale to tell.